Big Lerf Podcast, talking LRF and more. Hello, and welcome to the Big Lerf Podcast. Voted 2022's Lure Angler of the Year by the readers of Angling Times, Will Pender has consistently been at the top of all the Lerf-based species hunts over the last 10 years. Although often LRF-focused, Will is an angler who uses all lure methods to catch everything from specimen bass to the tiniest gobies. So, I've gone in for an interview. How you doing, Will?
Yeah, good mate, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good. This interview has been something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I've got the magazine and the podcast, sort of give an excuse to get done. Obviously, I know you really well, but for those who don't, just give a little bit of background on yourself.
Basically, I'm Will, 33, lived in Cornwall all my life, originally from the Isles of Scilly. Crazy mad life. I've got my fiancée Mads and 2 kids, 2 and 1, 3 dogs, a turtle and a bloody cat. That's kind of me. I'm a landscaper, gardener, dry stone waller by trade, and I fish whenever I get a chance.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, how'd you get into fishing?
Kind of family trade really. My family on the Isles of Scilly are commercial crab and lobster fishermen, so ever since I could hold a rod, I was encouraged to go out and catch them basketfuls of wrasse for pot bait, which at the time of being a young kid, 6-7 years old, it was great fun, but reflectively now, not a practice I would kind of endorse. So
of course.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. So it's in the blood, really.
Yeah, that was it. That was my background to fishing. It was just mainly wrassing on the Isles of Scilly and trolling for pollock and stuff like that off fishing boats.
Brilliant. So how long have you been living in Cornwall then, except from the Isles of Scilly, obviously?
I think I came over here when I was about 7 or 8 when my folks split.
Okay.
But yeah, that's...
Yeah. And what part of Cornwall's that always been?
So all over, but came across it's all in Cornwall, all over the place.
Yeah.
So I grew up, did my schooling in Helston. And
which obviously is a bit further down.
Down towards the Lizard. So growing up as a teenager and skateboarding was my passion. That's where kind of fishing, I always fished, I always occasionally dangled.
Yes. When
I revisited family or, the odd evening chucking mackerel feathers about. But then through my skateboarding, getting injured, fishing was something I did for my recovery. Okay. So growing up and then skateboarding, getting injured and fishing, it kind of, my body got to a point where I was fishing more than I was skating, and that's how it kind of worked into taking over my life in this kind of crazy way. But
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how obviously I come from a skateboarding background as well when I was a teenager, and that's interesting how we both come to LRF. And
there's quite a few of us out there that are kind of like urban sports, for want of I hate that phrase, but the fringes of societal sports that are falling into skateboarding right at the start. I mean, you look at the French scene, the French touch fishing scene, that's very street based, graffiti, and there's quite a lot of us that have fell down this kind of lure rabbit hole from that scene as we got older.
Interesting. So what was it that brought you to lure fishing?
Basically, I was bait fishing a lot, so I was bait fishing with a couple of guys, and Aaron Inslee, one of the guys down in Cornwall, we fished bait together a lot, did a lot of open comps and stuff like that. Yeah. And he fell into lure fishing. I don't know how or by who, but he ended up with a red rod and a lure vest and chucking pachinkos and X-layers around, and one day kind of bet me that he'd catch more wrasse on lures than what I would on bait. So I took him up on the bet and I won on bait, but I was so intrigued by the wrasse taking the lures that sent me down the rabbit hole.
When was this again?
2010-ish.
So that's early days for wrasse, lure fishing for wrasse.
Yes, so LRF had just come into the country around then, I think. Yes. So it would have been 2010 I fell into lure fishing. Yeah. And it was primarily for wrasse, figuring them out down West Cornwall. Brilliant. Climbing, fishing light, gear in my pockets.
It's exciting fishing, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it progressed to bass, and then at the time with bass you start off catching kind of average sized fish, and I couldn't seem to break that kind of 2-3 pound barrier. So I thought, well, I'm going to maximise what's there, and that's when I started exploring LRF. That was my road to LRF, was fishing lighter gear for the fish.
That's interesting. So
it wasn't the species hunting. It was maximising the fight, and that's still my passion now, is fishing as light as possible, as appropriately possible for the fish. Yes. Doesn't matter what it is. Fish as light as you can safely
to get the most out of it.
To get the most out of it for your enjoyment, but also, like I say, appropriately is the key word because of fish welfare.
Yeah,
you don't want to be leaving hooks in fish for no reason.
Of course. No, that's really interesting. I was going to say, obviously, it's through LRF really that everybody, especially in the Big Lerf group and through the Big Lerf podcast, would know you. Obviously, that's not all you do, but so can you just sort of go through your LRF journey, so to speak?
Yeah.
You know?
I will apologise now if you hear rustling. I've kind of had to make notes. I'm really bad at public speaking. I said to Ben how anxious I was doing this, so I kind of forced him to send me a list of the questions in advance so I can kind of prepare some answers and not swear too much.
I'm impressed with the notes, to be honest.
Oh, don't. My wrist is hurting from writing them today.
No, that's good.
So, yeah. LRF kind of came about through that wrasse and bass journey, and then just wanted to maximise. So I wasn't ending up just catching mackerel on 6-ounce beach casters. You know, I figured you get a better fight from them. So as I went down the rabbit hole of fishing lighter and lighter, I started blogs, Matt Jones, Matt Newcomb, Luke Fox, the Jersey guys.
Yeah.
I kind of went down that and I read that for 6 months. Just every evening I'd be reading that and trying to translate Japanese stuff. And my local shop at the time was Bassmasters down in Cambourne, and they were very much that red rods, X-layers and pachinkos, and that's pretty much all they did.
Okay.
And you start picking their brains about LRF, and they didn't really know.
Yeah.
At the time, my transport was limited and stuff, so it took me a while to kind of make my way up to the art of fishing. That was my kind of inroad into it. After doing all this reading, was I think I got buses and lifts and hitchhiked my way up to St Mirren, and I think my car had broken down at the time or something like that. So, but I knew I was going to buy a starter kit. So up to St Mirren and kind of embarrassedly shuffling in and kind of getting a LRF starter kit. It wasn't great, but it was.
Do you remember what it was?
Shimano Alivio, were they? Little silver reels.
Yeah.
I can't actually remember what the rod was. You got a pack of isome and a pocket insert kit.
Nice.
Your fluorocarbon.
Yeah.
I can't remember for the life of me what the rod was, but
quite an exciting little kit to get though.
Got that, got home, and the very next day or that week, got my car back, and I went up to Foy after reading about it in the guys' blogs, and I think I kind of gave it a fair whack at Foy and garfish, mackerel, few wrasse, and then I went to Charlestown and started catching the mackerel.
Yeah.
And just catching my first mackerel it was probably on a full length of large isome on a tiny jig head, because I didn't know any better. It kind of opened my eyes. Actually, this is how light you can go, and started that journey of learning the fish behaviours. Each fish has its own particular methodology, and I love that. I'm an anorak, and I was one of those kids as a teenager collected Pokemon cards. So as soon as I got light lure fishing, you then had species hunting.
Yes.
Which was in its infancy. It wasn't really a thing.
No.
It was all on the drop, pollock, pout, bass. That was kind of it. But I found out about species hunting, and that was it. It was Pokemon cards, got to catch them all.
That's it,
mentality and ethos, and I loved it. So
I've literally used that line in one of my blogs before. It's literally exactly the same. And obviously me and you, same generation, so growing up with Pokemon, skateboarding, LRF seems to be like a natural progression for that.
I think it's a male, not being genderist, this isn't the BBC, but we as blokes like to collect.
Yeah.
If you look around us, be it trains, be it fish, be it playing cards, and I think this is just a way of doing it while still feeling slightly caveman in the fishing mentality.
Yeah, I think so. It's a good balance. That's a good way of putting it, I think. Yeah, brilliant. So obviously I was going to say, like, what is about LRF that sort of keeps you coming back to it after so long? Because how many years have you really been doing it?
So I got that first starter kit in 2011.
2011. So that's what, 12 years.
12 years, yeah.
So that's a long time in a...
Too long.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes and no, obviously. I mean, you're doing pretty well. So what is it about that sort of keeps you coming back to it? Because I know the way I see it with you is that you quite often, you kind of go, I've kind of done it, I'm not worried about it. But then you seem to get the fire and you go again.
It does come through in waves. Fishing actually for me for quite a while has been my release. It's been my therapy.
Yeah.
Lots of things in life and stuff, and I've just needed to escape to the sea, and fishing's given me that excuse. So yeah, it's fishing as light as possible, but just to be by the sea. So periodically, mainly through the winters, I LRF. In the summer, I'm bassing. I'm not so much the past few years been on the wrasse, but I'm bassing a lot, all the way through autumn up till kind of December, and then I'm kind of in limbo until April when the wrasse really come on the feed. In years gone by, I've done freshwater, bit limited in Cornwall. Perch is, I like my perch, but LRF has filled that winter niche for me in the past few years. It's not about the species, it's just about going out with light gear, having a fight with a friend, having a beer, having a chat, defragging from life. That's now my enjoyment, and in turn sharing that with people.
I think that's definitely what it seems to have been my interpretation of what it's come, and it's kind of what been mine and your relationship really. We bumped into each other in Foy, I think it was, like years and years ago, and obviously that was really early on in my LRF fishing, and you introduced yourself as Scillybugger, obviously, which is your Instagram handle.
That's my old Instagram handle.
Which is quite interesting. And from then on, obviously, we've just been chatting ever since, and it's interesting because obviously really helped put me on a few fish. I remember when I really wanted to get on flounder, and I'm deviating from my script here, but I just wanted to talk about it while I think about it. We had a proper little hunt for him, didn't we, down in Foy? And I mean, you got snapped off by a beast. I remember that. You weren't fishing for him, you were going for dragonet. Do you remember that?
And it was up in the water, wasn't it? It came up really high, and I just couldn't resist that temptation. I should have left it for you because you were rigged up.
You literally went, that's mine, and cast towards it. I was like, I could see that's the fire I was talking about. You just can't help it. Just straight in.
No, that's it. But I should have left that for you. I still feel bad about that. But
I wouldn't.
But he was there, and it was too tempting, and I just flicked, and he just spun on me. It's not often found to get the better of you, but I was rigged up really light.
You weren't even remotely.
Probably a size 16 or something.
We were going for dragonet at the time.
Big, he could have taken any size hook. So.
That was a lovely size flounder, it really was. But it just sticks to my mind. It's one of my sort of favourite memories of fishing with you. But I was going to say, so you're going back to my questions, but you're probably most famous in the scene for winning or finishing very highly in species hunt competitions. And I want to sort of talk about that. Like, obviously, I know we talked about how the start of species hunting, but I mean, I think a lot of our listeners are going to be really interested in how you approach that. How did you get into that? So maybe start off with how you got into it and really driven on that.
Oh, getting into it was a kind of a funny thing. I, for years, lacked confidence unless I was really confident in myself about my ability to do it. So from picking up an LRF rod in 2011, it kind of took me 3 or 4 years until I even had the confidence to kind of say, right, with my own ability, that is, to go, right, I will do this comp. I might not place, but I'll do it. Which is fair play to the juniors that have been in the game for 6 months that are going up there, and they're giving it their all. That's big Lerf and the CLF. We've had guys, that just Tom Locke. He's been doing it literally a matter of weeks, and then came down to Falmouth and Ruben, and the confidence they've got, and kind of the gung ho. It doesn't matter. I'll give it a go. I wish I had that when I was their age, because it took me so long to get into the comps. But actually going, on species hunts.
So what competitions were around then in the early days?
As far as we literally had the CLF. That was it.
Year,
I think somebody did. There was like a series. Was it a league series? They did a Weymouth venue and somewhere else. I didn't take part in those, but CLF was. I say the big one. The numbers weren't huge initially, and they were won with 5 or 6 species in the early days.
Yes.
But by that point, I was already fishing with the likes of Luke Fox and Joshfletcher, and Josh had won it quite a few years already at that point. So he was kind of, as I entered it and as being friends, and we were already chasing species around the country and abroad at that point. He was kind of my incentive to get into it, to kind of banterly see how well I did against him.
Of course, yeah. And it's still like that now. Like when you fish together now.
No, not at all now. Not at all, actually. Josh he's a good lad, as Josh. I
yeah.
But no, his passion for species isn't there like it was. True. mine comes and goes.
Okay.
So I enjoy fishing in his company. It's that kind of defrag, have a pint.
Yeah.
It's not really competitive.
No, but I do like the dynamic when you two are together, because obviously that shared history you have. When you are fishing together, you kind of like, there's a bit of back and forth, bit of banter, and I do...
Can kind of tease each other a bit.
That's it, yeah.
But
you're obviously both
I would
excellent
tease
anglers.
anybody.
Yeah,
Lucas will tell you he's great sport for teasing whilst fishing. But yeah,
well, again, another great angler. So,
definitely. You know, he's the future. So these juniors,
yeah, it's amazing.
my eyesight can't keep it up.
Well, yeah, you're doing all right so far. So we'll talk about it. So in regards to planning for a comp, I mean, this is something that probably everybody who's listening to this will be really interested in, because I mean, you're sitting at the moment on 48 saltwater species in the Big Lerf Winter League as we speak, unless you're hiding any that you haven't told me about.
No, not this time.
All right,
all out in the open.
Okay.
Everything's there.
So
and 10 fresh.
Yeah, and 10 fresh. Let's not forget about that. So yeah, so what's that? 58 species, crazy. So how do you plan for it? What's your methods? What do you do?
I mean, if we talk about the long format,
Yes.
so the Big Lerf, I look at what species I'd assume, rightly or wrongly, are available at that time.
Yeah.
So I make a list, I make lots of lists, and then within that list I break it down to which ones I can get from what venue. I then break that down again, almost like a kind of flow chart to stages of tide.
Okay.
And then I set myself a goal, so I might say in Foy I can catch 6 species over a low water sight fishing. I'll go there and I'll try and tick them off. My fishing time is so limited. It might seem I fish a lot, but I have to try and channel as much into as short a space as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm using accumulated knowledge of where those species are and their behaviour patterns. I love researching. So knowing how those fish behave, I can then go and get the scorp, tick it, that's first drop scorp. That's done.
Yeah.
Cross that off the list. Move on, right, where am I going to get the tom pot? Where am I going to get the dragonet? Where am I going to get the painted? And I'd literally just methodically go through that list. So I set myself a 2-hour window to do it.
Yeah.
If I don't get it, I then move on to what else the next spot.
Okay.
So say I miss off dragonet, my next spot might be another harbour where I can get a couple of different wrasse species and dragonet. I then give it X amount of time, and I'll start with the dragonet.
Yes.
Focusing on dragonet, then work my way through the wrasse, so it kind of rolls.
Okay. And
I just kind of work my way through the list. The only exception to that is if I'm there and I see something.
Of course.
Something out of the blue. So if I was somewhere and mackerel swam by, I'd probably leave it rather than chase that single mackerel I've seen.
Yes.
But with the exception of that, if I see cool stuff, I will go for it.
Well, that's it. Well, sometimes you'll see something just come out from underneath a rock or whatever. I mean, I think every time I fish with you, that's what you seem to just randomly, you'll be like, oh, look at that there. And you just seem to have spotted something that was just coming out of I didn't notice, it was just in the corner of your eye, and you've seen that. So
I spend a lot of time sitting and watching.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's from my dirty smoking habit. I got to sit down to have a cigarette, and whilst I'm doing that, I can't fish. I look, and I spent a lot of time looking, and I grew up loving rock pooling. I love sharing rock pooling with my girls now, so doing that, you learn a lot about fish behaviour, and you kind of know where to look.
Where they're likely to hide.
So when it comes to targeting and sight fishing, you've got an idea of where to look in the first place.
Definitely.
You're not blindly searching. I don't do scratching sessions.
No.
I'm not going out and fishing blindly for whatever's down. I have targets, and once I've got them, I'll then move on.
Yes, that's interesting. So obviously that's through accumulative knowledge, and you've just sort of you've got this idea of what you're going to go for and what you plan for, but with the idea that you can change that approach. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, while we're talking about sight fishing, so much of what we talked about then is sight fishing. I mean, have you got any tips, anything you sort of live by when you're sight fishing? Is it just a case of just searching the water, or do you have any sort of...
Know your venue.
Yeah.
So go down there in daylight without the rods, look at the lie of the land. A lot of it, again, is more... I'm going to keep saying the word research because I spend way too much time on my phone just scrolling through fishing forums, going into diving sites and chatting to divers, commercial fishermen, you name it. I'll chat to anybody about fishing if it helps me get a grain of information.
Yeah.
So know your venue in daylight, know what you can catch there, potentially.
Yes.
go at night with a good head torch, a couple of rigs. Don't complicate it. You literally need a couple of rigs.
And what would you? Let's talk about rigs then. So what would you choose for sight fishing? What do you have just with you?
So target dependent. I normally would have, if I'm sight fishing in low tide.
Yes.
It'd be a single split shot to a size 14.
Okay.
14 or 16 would be my go-to for things like scorps, flounders, dragonettes.
Yeah.
I won't go too small with dragonettes. They're better on slightly bigger hooks. Just the way they feed, they suck it in and spit it out. And more often than not, you're hooking them as they're kind of spitting the food back out.
Okay.
And more recently, the Tenegos.
Yes.
You've given me a question. I'll come on to the Tenegos.
That's fine. Not a problem at all.
But Tenegos, they do help, but you've got to know your quarry when you're using them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I find sometimes if you, I've lost as many fish as I've hooked because of Tenegos. Or the same thing where you just like, you've caught the wrong thing at the wrong time, whatever it is, and it just you lose it, which is a big shame. I think it's very easy to focus on those Tenegos because they are so small and handy. But actually, for certain species, you'd be better off with a standard 22 or a 20.
And with sight fishing, I just gulp and ISO. When I'm species hunting, that's primarily what I use. It works. It's borderline lure, borderline this, borderline that.
Yeah.
You guys allow it, and it works. So I use anything else if that'll help. When sight fishing, I tend to use like a brighter coloured ISO.
Okay.
Because you are putting it on their nose. It's not about the fish seeing it; it's helping you see it.
Yeah,
at low light, using a bit of pink, you're going to be able to control where that is in relation to the fish far better than a piece of gulp.
Yes.
Which, unless it's one of the new brighter coloured ones.
Yeah, of course.
It's not about scent, so...
Yeah, it's just literally about putting something bright in front of them.
It's visual.
I've got the same thing with flounder. I always use light coloured lures, because there's no point putting it in front of you if you can't even see where your lure is.
No, I don't really like blind fishing. I like to see what I'm catching.
Yeah, that's interesting. I took a lot of that from you when I was learning, and obviously very much, a lot of my fishing now is sight fishing, and that's very much influenced by yourself.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so I wanted to sort of talk about the talking about competitions and things, but going back to the Cornish Lure Festival. So I think for me that feels like you're really synonymous with that.
Yeah, for better or worse, I do. It's kind of hallowed ground for me. I'm defending home turf.
Yes.
Years ago, it used to be like the visitors and locals were kind of separated out a bit more. That's changed now. Everybody kind of has fished it enough that visitors have got just as good a chance. So it was always a running joke. Got to keep the trophy in Cornwall, and I haven't let go of that. But I do love it, and it's the CLF is my kind of self-justification for all the hours that I'm out.
Yes.
Aside from the mental health side of things, it's my justification for the time out of the house, the money spent on lures, all that time sat on my phone. That's just the pressure and the stress of the short format.
Yes.
I love it. It's more skilled than, say, a longer format.
Yeah.
Putting that accumulated knowledge into a small kind of package and making a plan. And I make a very methodical plan for the CLF, very much like I was saying with the previous question, just know what I'm going to catch where, move on, know what I'm going to catch where, and move on. And with the CLF, I kind of make it my target to get as many as I can in the first 12 hours, and then try and push that to 20 in the next 12. Wherever I get to, push it to 20, then I'll sleep.
Okay.
The CLF is very much, it's not man versus fish, it's man versus tiredness. Definitely. And his ability to drive when so tired.
It definitely pushes you.
But I follow my list, and then I always try and keep the Sunday free for chasing up those odd bits that I haven't got or that I've heard have come out.
Okay.
The CLF, it's communication, it's hearing what people are catching and where they're catching, and fishing for information as much as fish. The plan always goes out the window by about 10 o'clock on the Saturday morning, but you're always listening out, and you're always nervous about what other people have got. Yeah. And by that point, you're tired, so your brain, you're playing a game against your own mind. Of course. Making right or wrong decisions. So. Yeah,
and you've obviously done it a few times, like going out on your own, but you've also had people with you at times as well. So that's always difficult. I mean, me and Rich have done it a few times. Obviously, Rich and Joe have done it once as well. And like it's a difficult thing to do when you've got other people as well.
Yeah.
But I also think that the one time I did it on my own, which I've talked about in the podcast, I found it really hard. I actually didn't, like, not in a hard way, like hard fishing. It was just hard to motivate myself in the same way.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So for years I did it with Josh or with Luke, and then I did it with my friend Joe from Wales. He came down and we did it. And it's a catch-22 fishing with somebody. You've got somebody in the car on DJ services or drive-in or buys you a coffee or tells you to just stop. You know, occasionally you're doing something stupid at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they can be the sanity to your insanity.
That's true.
But at the same time, it's double-edged, because you might have caught what you need to catch from a set venue.
Yes.
But you also want to support them in catching it, so you're then losing time. Time is species in comps. Time is fish.
Definitely.
And you're losing that time waiting for them, even though you know that it's probably going to be reversed somewhere else, and that person is probably more willing to give their time than maybe you are. It's a bit selfish, but I've only recently started fishing solo. Only probably the past 2 or 3 I've done. Maybe the past 2 I've done by myself.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's harder mentally because you've got nobody to kind of bounce off.
Yeah.
But fishing time-wise
is way more efficient.
Way more efficient.
Yeah, I found that as well. And I found that I had those moments where I made decisions purely for myself, and some of them worked out, some of them didn't. And it's it's an interesting thing. It's one thing I did miss, I think, is when that's why I love about fishing with the guys. Because obviously, when you're fishing with good anglers, and they start catching or they start using a different technique than you are, or they're approaching it slightly differently, you can adjust that to sort of match them, or you did something, they match you, and then but they might catch, I don't know, a different species to you, and that sort of drives you on. You might catch something there that you didn't even realise was there. And
that's it. I mean, I like last year's species hunt. There was one point. You weren't there, unfortunately, but there was myself, andymytton, Joe and Rich.
Yeah.
And I think Matt and Danny.
That's because I was behind for my...
you were working to late, weren't you? And we were all just crowded in such a small area, and we're all looking for different species. We were sight fishing down the side of Harbour Wall, and as if Rich or Joe wanted a scorpion, and one of them wanted a dragonet, and I kind of came up, stood next to each one of them, and kind of pointed it out. But then 10 minutes later, they know what I'm searching for, tom pot or whatever it was. One of them sees it and kind of points it out to you. So that camaraderie, whether you're fishing with them or you happen to bump into them, it's amazing. Yeah. There's some egos in LRF, but even in comps, the fact that people help each other out, even if it could lose you that place in, it's great. Yeah, I really like last year's CLF, that, and probably tiredness, but it was really quite emotional, just like how friendly everybody is at helping other people, even if it potentially means you lose.
Yes. We've seen that in the Winter League as well with a lot of people, so that's been really good.
Giving. Yeah,
definitely. And so obviously going on to winning, obviously, you tend to get rods and things like that. I mean, your rod collection must be huge after winning so many. Is there any favourites in there?
I don't actually have that many rods.
Do you not?
I'm like the worst person to talk about tackle with, because I know what works for me, and that's all I fish. I have 6 rods.
Okay.
3 of them gather dust. One of them's a heavy lure rod for boat. One of them's the Apia Grande, which is a lovely rod that I won last year at the CLF, but it's too finesse for me. I'm a bit of a Neanderthal.
Okay. What's that rated?
Something really silly, like 5. See, I consider 5 grams too light for me.
Yeah, I know.
As a top end.
Yeah, it's weird. I
like using one rod for a whole session. That's it. So I want it to cover all bases. And I've got an egg cast. I say I've got an egg cast. I had an egg cast. I got it for fun. I got it purely.
The egg cast.
You know as I do. There's a spot in a certain harbour where at certain times of the year the light is on the water and the scad are just there. They're boiling and they're like 2 pound scad. Yeah. And I've got this 5 foot whatever the egg cast is. I don't even 4 foot.
It's tiny. Yeah.
But I got it purely for just being an idiot and having fun. And I took it out for one session and had so much fun. Me and Josh just schoolie bass and these 2 pound scad on this rod that just bends to the butt. It was hilarious. I haven't used it since, but my daughter Harriet, she's claimed it. That's her rod. Okay. So when I take her out, she's using it, learning to cast with it, catching fish with it.
Nice. How old is she?
She's only 2. She'll be 3 in June, but that's
a great start.
She's catching fish. and she's already claiming all my gear.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, the kind of the 3 rods I use most, 2 of them are bassing rods.
Okay.
And they all serve multi-purpose. So
Yeah.
I've got a heavy bass rod that does headlands and surf. That's
Okay.
9 foot something, rated to 50 grams.
And what is that?
That's just a Maximus high energy.
Okay.
They're good rods. They're not
Yeah.
tarty. They're not expensive.
No.
Ben Coleman will laugh because he always quotes me for saying my gear is a tool. Well,
Yes.
it's a tool.
Yeah.
That's for you, Ben. The other one is another bassing rod, but it's a bit shorter and a bit lighter. And I use that for estuary, weedless, weightless plastics.
Yes.
But that's also my wrassing rod and my piking rod.
Okay.
So
It's a real all-rounder,
it covers all bases. And then my Lerfer, I've just got a triple cross.
Yeah.
Major craft triple cross, 10 grams.
So it's the Agi.
Oh, don't ask me specs.
Okay,
See,
yeah.
this is why don't ask me specs.
Is it solid tip?
No, tubular.
Tubular.
I don't like solid tips.
No.
I break the mould in species hunting. I don't like solid tips.
Which is really interesting. If you speak to Rich has got a real feeling about solid tips in the bite, and also andymytton. Both talk very specially about.
Yeah, I'm not as technical when it comes to tackle.
No.
I'm more technical about fish behaviour and
Yes.
habitat and
Yeah.
feeding patterns. That interests me more than spec of the rods
Yeah.
or sink rates of jig heads.
But I think that's quite an interesting thing how we can all do the same niche of our sport and yet approach it from such a different angle, which is really interesting.
I think so. Like I say, it's just having one rod for a session. I want to be able to chuck 7, 8, 9, 10 gram metals.
Yeah.
And then in the next breath, I might want to go down to like 0.5 gram split shot
Yes.
with a solid tip. I could do the split shot, but I would struggle with, say, a drop shot. And I fish a
And the
snooded
metals,
drop
yeah.
shot, not your version, my version.
Yeah.
That isn't my version, just before anybody says it. It came from some other guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, the heavy metals on solid, metals on solid tips for me, unless you go really small and you're using the ester lines,
Yes.
which I got fat landscaper's fingers.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. So
No.
I like a tubular tip because it covers all bases.
Yeah. So you're just coming at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It's a tool.
Yeah. Interesting. I'll come back to that snooded drop shot in a bit. With lures, I just want to talk about lures. So obviously, I know it's probably going to be talking more about bass fishing because I think you're going to have probably a little bit more soft spot there. But I mean, we'll talk LRF first. I mean, obviously, other than the gulp, the isom, which is obviously the go-to in species hunts.
Yeah, I wouldn't take anything else in the
No.
species hunt.
No. Is there any sort of favourite lures that you've had over the years that you particularly like LRF wise? And this could be anything, metals, plastics.
Eco gear straw tails.
Yeah.
Like you cannot go wrong with an eco gear straw tail.
Yeah.
Either the aqua or the unscented.
They're both great.
I mean, the gulp ones are good, but for me, eco gear edges it. They're just what we had down here. There's going back quite a way. There was always a gulp eco gear split. So
Yes.
down in Cornwall, we had eco gear, and then Devon and Dorset traditionally always used gulp.
That's interesting.
The gulp fish fry were like hotcakes up there, whereas aqua straw tails down in Cornwall you just couldn't get. They were just gold.
Yeah.
They were magic. And I just caught so many firsts and so many special fish at special moments on the straw tails.
Yeah.
And fresh salt everywhere.
Yeah. No, they're brilliant. They're really great lure.
So that's and then crank. Look, I love little cranks.
Yes.
I don't use enough in the salt, but
No.
in the fresh, you can't beat a little crank for chub, trout, perch.
Any particular favourites?
The Magecraft Zoners,
Yeah.
I've started getting into those. The old Eco Gear, what were they? SXs, I think they were. But also the top water versions, they were a PX, or were they? Little PX, little shrimp thing with tassels coming out of it. Chub off the top were just, I love it. We don't have chub in Cornwall.
I'm about to say, where do you go for chub? That's
Taunton.
Okay, yeah.
It was the first venue I was shown for them, and it's always just had a soft spot for me on the tone there.
Yeah,
and,
the tone is
and in
fantastic.
the canal, but more so in the river.
Yeah.
But yeah, make a pilgrimage normally 16th, 17th when the river season opens, just to get that top water chub fixed.
Yeah, they're brilliant fish. And bass, obviously going into bass lures, what would you?
Bass again. I fish very few bass marks. I've got 4 or 5 that I just kind of cycle through or I stick on for a month, depending on how the fish are feeding and what prey species are in that the fish are on. But I like a big shad. I like it's the opposite of my LRF. I like a 20 centimetre up to a 25 centimetre. 150 to 250 is kind of the range I use. A lot of guys in bassing will go 120 as a standard, so like the black minnow.
Yeah.
I like a 180 Storm GT minnow, they're called.
Yeah, I've seen you fish with those before.
I fish heavy and I fish big, so they're 50 grams, and I've got 64 gram versions as well.
Wow. It's a beastly thing to cast.
Yeah, my rod's only rated to 50, but it knows what it's doing. It's weathered in. It's weathered in. I wouldn't ever do it on a new rod.
No.
But yeah, I like big shads, big heavy shads, because one of my favourite spots is in deepish water.
Okay.
With a raging tide. It's got one of the most powerful tide pools in Cornwall.
Okay.
And you're basically working the edge of a reef that is almost, if you're at the head of a T, it's the arm that sticks out from you, and you're working that arm where the bass is sitting one side of it to the tide, and you're basically working over that, so you need to get down quick to get the lure in the zone.
Yes.
And then you're just bumping it back, so you need that weight and that profile, and I just love it. It doesn't matter whether it's £3, £4, £5, £6. When you hit a fish in tide like that with appropriate size, like weighted rods, with a nice action, that £4 fish it feels like a £10 pollock. It feels like a £10 bass. It just it's fun. Fishing should be fun, and it is, and it's just a juxtaposition from my LRF.
Yeah.
LRF is small and light. Bassing is heavy. Yeah. It just gives me that I'm doing something different mentality.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting that you can have those two loves and they work really well together. Sort of balanced out. Obviously, while we've talked about bass, anything particularly for wrasse that you like?
Anything Z-man.
Okay.
Wrasse and knobs.
Yeah.
I said I wasn't going to swear, but wrasse can be real pains in the bum when it comes to biting your lures in half.
Yes.
Like, really, if you're using anything too fancy, you're wasting your time and your money. So I like Z-man. And bug ants. Bug ants are good.
Bug ants.
I primarily use creature baits just because they've got profile. So anything like that, but that last. They've got to have a last. I'm not fussed about scent on them. There's certain times of year where I'll use certain colours. So spring would be June bugs and blues, because that's kind of their breeding kind of. My theory is that's, you see male wrasses' lips go blue.
Yes.
So when they see blue, that's kind of another bloke coming in on his territory. So I always use June bugs and blues.
That's interesting. Okay, so you're thinking that you're just trying to trigger them into an aggressive bite.
Yeah, kind of like I'm going to defend my territory.
Just through blue, yeah.
And then it's a bit like sticklebacks. So when I went up to Hartlepool, I totally forgot this fact when I was there, and I wish I'd remembered it. But sticklebacks traditionally were always caught on bits of red lures, or a bit of red fluff, because it mimics the other males which have red.
Yes.
So they then attack it. It's the same theory with wrasse. At certain times of the year, I'm looking to imitate or agitate behaviours or imitate prey, and crab and little squat lobsters are kind of their primary food source.
Yes.
Until they get big.
Yes.
Big wrasse like fish.
Yes.
Big wrasse like shads.
Yeah.
And I pick up my big wrasse when I'm bassing.
Yes.
But wrassing, it's got to be durable, and it's got to be tough.
Yeah. So while we're talking about those sort of big fish as well, I mean, what's your biggest wrasse that you've had?
So I split my fishing between silly and here.
Okay.
Because on silly I've had wrasse to like 8.5 pound.
Wow.
So 62 centimetres was my biggest.
Wow.
Over here I've had a 56.
Okay.
But that was still top end £6.
Yes.
And both of those have come on big shads.
Yeah.
And I just think once I'm going to get really anorak here about fish, but if you look at wrasse, people...
You're in the right place, mate. Don't worry.
People laugh at me for lip gripping wrasse.
Yes.
But I only lip grip big wrasse.
Okay.
If you catch a big wrasse, you look at its teeth. They're nubs. There's nothing left of them. They're rounded off. When wrasse are smaller, they're feeding all the time, so they'll grind limpets off. Yeah. And I've got this theory that they can only do that for so long. A bit like us, your teeth get knackered and you have to move on to softer food. So as that wrasse grows and its teeth wear out, it's got no choice but to become more predatory to the fish, because it hasn't got the teeth to go for the shellfish.
Okay, interesting theory.
So it's chasing the softer food. Yeah. It's got the strength, it's got the body mass. It can actually now use energy to get a higher protein, higher energy food.
That's easier on the teeth.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a wrasse over £5 on a creature bait, but I have had plenty on shads.
Yes.
So just my opinion. And
Yeah,
remember, this is all my opinion.
Yeah. That's the reason why I've got you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because I want to hear your opinion. I mean, my experience is similar. All of my best wrasse have been on shads, every single one. I really like creature baits. I love fish. I think they're really good fun to fish with,
And they look cool.
They do look cool, yeah. But you get the extra cool factor of it. But it's definitely, I think shad's a simple paddle tail is probably my favourite go-to.
Metals as well. Just the slow fall metals. You look at Loki Adventures, Kieran down on Loki.
Yes. Off the boats, yeah.
Off the boats.
Yeah.
Those metal shads, metal jigs,
Yes.
slow fall, the size of the fish they're getting with those. But again, they're imitating fish.
Yes.
Not bait, not creatures, not anything bottom living, but it's mid and top water fish it's imitating.
Yeah.
And absolute monsters. So.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think if you could fish the ground where wrasse live with metals more effectively, or losing them every 2 seconds, you'd probably get hundreds, but it's just it's a real tricky. I've had quite a few.
You can target them, so like cuckoos. You can
we'll
target
get to
them
that.
on metals, but
Yeah. Obviously, but again, it's the ground and what you're willing to lose.
Yeah,
Definitely. So I was going to say, are there any species that you haven't really figured out yet that you would love to? Is there anything that you really like? I wish I could figure that out. I wish I could sort that out.
There's a few fish that I've neglected to put too much time into in recent years.
Okay.
One of those is wrasse, but they're kind of been my mainstay for so long. The other is trout, river trout. I kind of neglected, but I understand their feeding patterns. The one that really I've struggled with, being my bogey fish, is zander.
Okay.
A huge part of it is our closest from where I live in Cornwall. It's 3 hours to the closest stretch, which is the Gloucester Canal.
Yeah.
That's a long way, and you've got to make a full day out of it. I can't do hit and run sessions to learn behaviours, to understand patterning. I can't put that time in. So I've struggled in this country. I caught them out in Belgium, went out to Open Street Ghent and got some great mates out there, and they put us on to some, and loved it.
Yeah.
They're not particularly, the size we were catching weren't particularly well fighting, but the this is where I did enjoy the technical side, was the retrieve.
Yes.
And fishing light and feeling that bite on the drop, and kind of lift, reel down, tap tap, lift, reel down.
Yeah.
Once you got that patterning into your head, the fish would come. I've tried to translate that over here on numerous occasions, but be it seasonal change or the fact that they're over there in different waters with different prey species, different this, different that.
Yeah.
For years, I mean, it's probably 8 years in this country, and I would try every time I went north. I would try 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
If I got a window for a zander, and wasted all that mileage and not one. Plenty of perch and pike, which is great, but when you're doing that drive for zander and not catching them, it becomes a real mind game, and each trip that you don't get one then subsequently affects your next trip.
Of course.
Thankfully, coming back from Hartlepool the other week, Chris Hunt, is it Chris Hunter? Sorry. Kindly gave me a spot to try that wasn't too much of a detour, and it was just the right point in the drive where I needed to stop and stretch my legs anyway. So gave it a go, and I said, right, that's it. I'm just going to give it an hour and a half for one. If I don't get it, not the end of the world. 40 minutes in, kind of like thinking, I can see why it's working. I'd had a couple of perch, and I had a really nice pike as well. And it's just, I was just tapping between 2 canal boats, fishing really lighter than I normally would, just feeling it down on the drop. And I just felt this little tap. I missed it, and I was kicking myself. I was like, what was that? What was that? Flicked back, and I just came back through it again, exactly the same. Using a little LMAB, Kofi, I think they're bleak shads.
Yeah, they're nice there.
They're really cool. I love watching European fishing stuff on YouTube. But anyway, twitching one of those back, and it just hit me again, and that was it. I got my first UK zander. I mean, it was microscopic.
It was small.
It was about 8 inches, but I was so stoked because it had broken that 8-year duck. And Josh messaged me after I messaged him. We've got a little group chat with him and Tim Howe, and we just kind of, I said, look, I got one.
Yeah.
And he went, it won't be hard to beat your PB.
That's true.
So that's I've got that to look forward to. I'm
Definitely.
not ruling out zander, but they have been they have been a monkey on my back for quite a while.
I was glad you were able to get that one. That's good.
Well, that started my freshwater campaign. I got it, and then I was like, right, I've got another 2 hours. I can go Taunton, and I can tick off this, and I can tick off that. Going for that, I didn't even photograph the first perch and pike I had because I wasn't going to do the freshwater. So I got that Xander, and I was like, yeah, I'll see if I can get 10. I set myself, a month to get 10 species in freshwater, which is not my comfort zone.
But you've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
We'll see once you've done all the tallying where that ends up. But
yeah. Well, we'll look forward to seeing how that finishes. But yeah, so that brings us obviously pretty perfectly to the Winter League. And we've talked about it. So you've got over 50 species in fresh. I mean, you said that to me. You're not really focused on it. You're not going to give it much attention. I mean, you're sitting there with 58 species combined. It looks like you're giving it some attention.
Yeah, I wasn't going to fish it, and you're going to say I always play these mind games. Yeah, but it depends where my head's at that moment in time. If I'm feeling the species. Yeah. I normally say it about a comp. It's not in general. In general, I don't species fish. No. I go for light sessions, or I go and I try and help other people. I get a lot of people messaging me, asking if they can show them around, or they're down on holiday. A lot of that, and a lot of the young guys messaging me, so I want to help them out. And I stood at the back door, and the missus came over and said, "Oh, what's that you're reading?" And I said, "Oh, Ben, Joe, and Richard put up. They're doing a winter Lerf league again." And she went, "Are you fishing it?" I went, "No." And she said, "Well, why not? You're going to be fishing anyway. You're going to be fishing anyway. It doesn't matter." She said, just let go of your ego. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. You're going to be fishing anyway. Yeah. So I was like, all right, but it's going to be more social, which I've tried as much as my time can allow it. I have tried to hook up with people as and when I can, or at least help people out if they're coming down. But I set myself a goal of 30, which is what I got last year. That was it. I was just 30. I was going to be happy. And then I hit 30 mid-January, early January-ish, and I thought, well, I've got month and a half, 2 months left, let's go for it. I'll set myself the next goal, which was my next goal was 39, because that's what Lucas got the previous year as the winning, but you weren't counting giant gobies this year. Yes. So if I got 39, I would have done one better than what he had. Correct. Yeah. So I was just pushing myself off previous, and then got to 39, and then I was like, realistically, it's got to be 50. just for myself, like everything else aside, it's got to be 50, just to say that I've done 50 and in 4 months over winter. Yeah. And you said it is a mic drop. It is a bit like, but at the same time, I love everyone that LRFs, and I hope they still find me approachable, even though I'm kind of pushing myself. And if anybody wants to come at me, then do it, because it's you're going to enjoy the process, and it's going to push you to learn. Yeah. If I can set the bar and somebody beats me, I'll genuinely be so happy for them. I'll buy them that pint. I think I owe you a few, but
probably do.
Yeah. But if somebody comes at me and they beat it, I'm so psyched for them. I'm so chuffed, because they've had that journey to get there, and the learning that you do along the way, and you've got to be passionate.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely, and I think it's come through, and I don't think people think. I mean, certainly within the Big Lerf group, so to speak. I mean, the respect for yourself, and I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass too much, but like,
please don't.
No, but it's the respect is definitely there, and I don't think people see that. They want to see you pushing it to the point where we're seeing near 50 species, whether that's like...
Yeah, I've still got another 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks to catch 2 more somewhat species. I mean, that's a big ask.
The hardest time of year, but I've got ideas.
You've got ideas. Well, I mean, I look forward to seeing if you can do it, but it's certainly set a bar very, very high for future leagues and stuff when we do that. So it's really interesting. And but yeah, so I mean, we've talked a lot about juniors. Have you got any advice for people who are just starting out on their lure fishing journey?
So starting out, don't matter junior, otherwise, if you're starting out, you're getting into it for the right reasons. You want to kind of explore what you can do. You're interested in the fish and in the techniques and in maximising the fun you can have. I would say my number one thing is research. Know your fish, know your ground. Even if you've got to go, and I'm going to say a dirty word here, Ben, but if you've got to go down and fish it with bait to know what is there, do it. Don't brag about it. You don't deserve bragging if you're using ragwear, right? Nobody cares. Don't take those pictures. Yeah. But to know what's there, and get an understanding of it, and then go down with lure And actually, it's going to be harder with lure than it is with bait, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Enjoy that challenge, and with that is to do it with somebody. If you're just starting out, or you've got a mate that does it, get another mate involved.
Yes.
Get 2 or 3 of you down there and drive each other on. I worked in education for a long time, and I believe like collective learning is far better than just being told to do something or how to do something. Go and figure it out. Being handed it all, yes, you'll catch fish, but you won't get that same achievement levels, and you won't take the transferable skills away. You won't take that watercraft of, I caught that fish there because somebody told me to catch there, versus I caught that fish there because the tide was curving around a bend, there's a little sandbank and a bank of weed.
Yeah.
That's the habitat that fish likes. You could then take that information and you could go anywhere you like fishing and know that you've probably got a better chance of catching that species there because of that fact. Fish with somebody, it halves, you can share that learning, you can kind of defrag, and you can have a laugh and a bit of a friendly competition, have a pint if you're old enough.
Yeah.
And it makes it fun. You learn together, you can share those catches. Like we said with the CLF, you can kind of point each other onto fish, you can
Definitely.
but celebrate each other's successes and support each other when they're not. And that's what the Big Lerf has been great. You know, there's been so much support for so many people. It's just one love, man. It's great.
Yeah,
Sound like a right hippie, but it is amazing.
It's been really good. We're really proud of
just
that.
don't get burnt out. Don't expect too much. Keep it fun.
Yes.
Keep it fun and set your goals realistically.
That's an easy trap to fall into, I think.
Yeah, you'll get burnt out and you'll lose the passion. I've seen it. I've been in the game longer than any sane person has any right to be, and it's driven me insane many a time. If you set that bar too high too soon, you will burn out and you'll lose the passion, and that's not what you need to do. A comp isn't LRF. LRF is what you choose to make it. I mean, you guys call it the Lerf, and you say that E doesn't stand for anything, but it's, for me, the E is everybody, and it's it's evolving. Lerf is evolving.
Yeah.
If you're starting out, evolve with it. Evolve your own technique. I've noticed recently that fishing up in Hartlepool and in other areas, and with you guys, everybody fishes slightly different. You might fish the same rig, but we all fish it with an accent, for want of a better word. Just because somebody is catching a fish on one method doesn't mean you'll catch it in the same place even on that same method. We all hold the rod different, we all wobble our hands, we put the time in, figure out what works for you, and have fun doing it. Have fun.
Completely agree.
Don't take yourself seriously.
Sort of coming to a close now, but are there any techniques that you think are underrated or overrated?
There's no technique underrated.
Yeah.
If it's underrated, it's because not enough people are doing it. But if it's working for you, amazing.
Yeah.
Like, hugely. Like, if any method is working for you, then fish it. It's about catching fish. I'm going to be controversial when it comes to overrated. Yeah. So, Tenegos. And I'm probably going to sound like a hypocrite because I do use them. But it's how they're used. This is that Family Guy, you know, was it Simpsons or Family, grinds my gears. If I could have like a 5-minute slot, which I'm going to use this as, is a 5-minute grind my gears.
Please do, yeah.
Tenegos are amazing. Don't get me wrong, and please nobody take this personally, but they are overused. Ben, Joe, Rich, you're going to hate me, but the stinger rig is not a stinger rig. A stinger rig is when the hook is in the back of the same bloody lure.
Yeah.
Tenegos, for me, personally, please, again, don't be offended, they're too small to be fished blind. I've seen too many fish, like deep hooks recently, and the wrong species. You don't need Tenegos for tompots, for garfish. If you're fishing mid-water, whatever, they don't need to be on.
No,
if you've got that stinger rig, the stinger rig on, take that stinger off. You don't need it. For me, the only time I'll ever use a Tenego is when I'm just using a Tenego and I'm sight fishing. It's not an assist on the back of a bigger lure with a little trailing bit for shy biters. It's if I can see the fish and I'm putting it on their nose and it's the appropriate fish. So a Dover sole, which was microscopic, or clingfish, Montague's example, fair play. Use the Tenegos if you're in freshwater and you're after a little bleak and stuff like that. Yes, but you're visually seeing them. You're not blindly searching. If you're blindly searching with Tenegos, you run the risk of deep hooking those fish. Yeah. And a lot of the fish we catch in Lerf, they're very territorial and they're very slow growing. If we damage them, then there will be a knock on.
Yeah.
Same with overfishing a particular area. There's always a knock on. It might be easy fishing now, and with Tenaga it might guarantee you that fish, but the knock on is you won't be able to catch that fish again.
No, I agree.
Or that fish will scare other fish in the area away. Use them appropriately. Same with any lure, anything like that. Use it appropriate for that fish. I fish a heavier rod than most because I want to be geared up to fish appropriately. You're not going to get the best fight in the world from, I don't know, a blenny.
Yeah,
common blenny in a rock pool is not going to give you much hassle.
No.
It doesn't matter what rated rod. You could have a rod rated to 3 gram. It doesn't matter. It's not going to take line.
No.
So fish it with a rod that you could also use to catch something else. You know, probably where I'm hypocritical is in the congers, because I do target the congers.
Yeah.
But I know where I'm targeting them. I know that my odds of landing it are better than my odds of not landing it.
Yeah.
And that's more about location than it is about fish. So
I think it's also worth saying that you also tie on a really long leader of, say, what, 18 pounds, 16 pounds?
So I fish heavier. So I'm fishing my light rod, but I fish a heavier leader just in case there is rub.
Yeah. Which you will have with conger.
Yeah. My spot is actually predominantly sand.
Yeah.
So as long as I can... They're under a key. There's no rocks or boulders. They're not in rocks or boulders. They're sitting in scoured out bits of sand.
Yeah.
So as long as I get the rod lower than the key, there's no rub. The line is parallel with the sand. It's not under the key.
It's unusual.
But, it's a very specific spot.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, use the appropriate size rod. If you're chucking around for mackerel, you don't want to be using a 3 gram rod.
Yeah.
It's great fun, but if you're on top of a harbour wall at low tide, how are you going to land it? You end up running the risk of snapping that mackerel off with the metal in its mouth. The mackerel's got a hook in its mouth, but probably more importantly this day and age, that's a £5 metal that's just swimming off.
Yeah.
Just hook and rod, just appropriate for the fish. Fish welfare, I think we've got to be really careful targeting small fish. There's a lot of fishing communities out there that they see all small fish as juvenile fish, which isn't the case, as we know. Yeah. But we've got to handle it. We've got to show respect to fish. Yeah. Again, that's me being a hippie, but Tenagos used wrong run the risk of deep hooking and damaging and ruining certain areas for fishing. Yeah,
I'd argue that when you're fishing very, very small, or you're talking like size 22s, or you've got some of the even smaller ones, if you're doing fishing any of those blind, unless the rod you're using is incredibly sensitive, you're probably going to deep hook anything that goes onto that. So with sight fishing, we've talked about sit fishing.
If you're getting those shy bites, then you don't need to go small. You just need to be using the right lure or in the right area. So more often than not, my it's a bit of a secret, but it's not a secret. You know it, and I've shared it with you. But a baiting needle.
I was about to talk about that.
Not a carping style baiting needle, but like a sea angler baiting needle for worm. You feed your worm onto that, and it's hollow tubed. You put your hook in the end, and you can feed your isomor gulp or whatever your lure is right to the very, very tip. So
the worm's gone up on your line.
Yeah, so the worm is all the way up your line. Yeah. So you are you're presenting a bigger lure with the hook right in the tail. And I will more often than not, I'm using 16 is probably the lowest that I go if I'm blind fishing. Yeah. If I'm blind fishing, searching it's high tide, whatever, I don't go below that, because any species that I could catch going smaller, I could catch when it's low tide. Yes. But it allows you, those shy biters will take it. Again, fish behaviour, you look at how a fish feeds. If you're a small fish, you're still going to go after a ragworm. Yeah. You're not going to take it all in, and you're not going to go for its head because you could get injured, but you will nip its tail.
Yeah, tail nipping.
So by presenting that hook right at the end, you're giving that long profile, but you're doing away with the need of the small Tenago assist.
Well, that's kind of what I would say when we're talking about the stinger rig, so to speak, but why it's so effective is because they're going for the larger body of the lure of what you're using, whether that's just wrasse, bit of ice, and whatever you're using, and they're just, you pick them off on the stinger, so to speak, as we've called it, which isn't a true stinger, as you're right, because it looks like a bit's come off it or something like that. which obviously when you're sight fishing, you can do that very effectively.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly effective rig for species hunting when you're going for very small stuff. But you're spot on. If you can imitate that with a single hook within the body of the lure, but you're actually just almost putting the stinger in the tail.
It's just a single hook.
It's just a single hook, yeah. So it's not even a stinger, it's just part of the rig. And that's part of your snooded drop shot as you use it.
It works snood, it works for drop shot.
Yeah.
The only way it doesn't work is obviously jig heads.
Yeah.
But then you're not generally going to present jig heads and get interest on anything on the jig head for stuff that's on the bottom.
Of course, yeah.
Unless you're floundering.
Yeah.
In which case, if you're using a jig head, you're targeting something specific, so
That's
you're not blindly scratching.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, we might as well talk about your snooded drop shot, because that's always been a funny one for me, because you obviously I fix mine, so mine's obviously I pull mine out of the drop shot knot and then I just have it somewhere like a loop, so it's loop drop shot. You tie yours onto the line, but so it's almost like a running, so you can move it up and down.
So it's not my rig. Some of the boys down in southeast Devon, back in the day, I think they created it. Out in Europe in the fresh water, they call it a searching rig, but they use a snood that is meters long for in rivers.
Okay.
Mine, so yours is adjustable at the lead, isn't it?
Yes.
So
like a standard drop shot.
Yeah, like a standard drop shot. Mine is adjustable on the snood.
Yes.
So I tie my lead. I like my lead to be fixed, and I tie just above that. I tie a single overhand knot as a weak link almost. I tie my snood directly onto my main line, float stop knot, grinner knot, whatever you want to call it, and then I can run my length whatever I like it to be. It gives me full flexibility. Yeah. I don't have to uncrimp the drop shot weight and risk snapping the line. More often than not, when you've got those drop shots, you're breaking the line.
Cut the line with your weight, yeah.
So I can adjust that up and down. I can fish it like a split shot almost. It just gives me as direct contact with the lure as the fixed drop shot. It gives, it just gives me maximum. I can fish a long leader with my snooded drop shot, and I could fish 1 minute. I could fish it 6 foot off the bottom, and the next minute I could fish it on the bottom. I can control where it is in the water.
The one bit that I would say where you're an absolute madman though is if you hook a decent sized fish on that, it's like the chance of it slipping is just,
it slips.
It does slip.
A bit like a pennel rig. It's kind of, you want it to slip. So
you
see it as a negative.
Yeah.
The fish is down by the weight, which means the weight is up out of the snags. Whereas with a fixed lead, if you snag with a fixed lead and you snap off, you're more likely going to snap off at the knot where the hook is. Whereas I snap off at the weight and I've still got the fish attached. It's statistics.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's another reason why we do the same thing but different. It's interesting how we come across and approach things differently. But I'd say yours is definitely more adjustable quickly than, say, anything I do on that.
A fraction of seconds. I'm just in the habit of tying mine. I've been doing it for too long.
Of course,
It's my go-to. I'm not going to knock yours. I'm not going to knock anybody else's. Like I said earlier, if it works for you, do it and own it and have fun. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares what rig you're using, what drop shot you're using.
But it's always very interesting. I mean, I would argue people do care because they'll definitely be interested in it, but it's in a very positive way.
You're not going to get kudos though for whether you use a snooded drop shot or a fixed drop shot.
No.
Not in the same way as say you caught a fish on a metal versus you caught it on a
it's metal
shot.
Or a crankbait or something like that.
It's about hardness levels. Kudos.
Definitely.
You guys chatted about it in the last podcast. It's just kudos. It's hardness levels. You could catch a flounder on a split shot. Or you could andymytton it on a crankbait. Myself, you and others have had them on metals. It's hardness levels gives you the kudos.
Definitely. And that's certainly within the groups of the between individual anglers and stuff like that. I like having that sort of banter between what you can get.
But don't knock yourself. Don't go out setting yourself a target of catching your first flounder on a metal or a crankbait. You're gonna. It's gonna frustrate the hell out of you. Learn the fish, catch the fish, and gain the confidence in the fish, and then challenge yourself.
Definitely.
Don't jump for. They're not cool points. They're just those are people that have been in it for a while, just challenging themselves and being idiots, and sometimes getting successful at being idiots.
That is pretty much what we do, is just being successful being idiots. And so just moving, sort of closing it off, but so you're a family man now. Obviously, since I met you, when I first met you, you weren't a dad, and now you're a father of 2. What do you see for the future? How do you combine those two sides of your life, family and fishing?
You sent me the questions. I asked you to send me the questions, and as I was writing it, I just thought I was writing, and I don't know where my head was at, but it made me smile reading it back. So I want to I started it off with the future is a vortex of uncertainty in a topsy-turvy world, which just sounds such pretentious bollocks. No, my life at the minute is crazy. I got two little ones, 2 under 3. I got one that was 1 the other day, and one that's going to be 3 in June.
Yeah.
Me and the missus planning weddings, and we're only at the planning stages, but we've been engaged for too long. House is mad. 3 dogs, a cat, and a tortoise called Turtle. With work and life and everything else, future is just day to day. Just take it as it comes.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. Mads is really, she's really understanding. She understands that I need that time by the sea or by the water.
Yeah.
So we've kind of had to sit down, as you will do. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's
I
huge
appreciate
news.
that. Well, I ask you this question with interest, so yeah.
Yeah. I would more than happily spend an hour talking to you about the dad's perspective of pregnancy, but these guys want to hear me talk fishing.
Definitely,
so
yeah.
There's some great apps out there though that remind you when to give her foot rubs and stuff. But no, I just, I've been instructed on a wedding day, no fishing.
Okay.
I'll see if I can push it, but I can't say there won't be a rod in the car.
Yeah.
But no, I just take each week as it comes. But we kind of, sorry, I'll get back to where I was. I kind of tangented, but
that's fine.
We had to sit down and look at, we both value our own free time and our hobbies. But to fit that around our work and the kids and everything else going on, it kind of, we worked out hour by hour, sleep, minute of sleep by minute by sleep, what the kids need when the kids are in nursery, when mother-in-law can have them, and we're kind of dictating when she can have them so that it gives us time. But we have 15 hours each a week, including travel time for our own hobbies. Yeah. So my future is kind of like those 15 hours for fishing, and then family time. But yeah, maximising those 15 hours.
Yeah, you've already said that you're getting your daughter fishing and
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
and also if I take the kids, it doesn't come out of my
I was
weekly
about
allowance.
to say that, yeah, surely.
So I can get a fish in without it eating into my quota. But no, she's mad for it. I shared to the magazine with you guys. But no, so my greatest catch at the minute is my eldest Harriet. I say eldest, she's 2.5. She is mad for it. She's claimed every rod as hers. I came back from the CLF with a bag of goodies. I haven't seen half of them since. They're squirreled away in her room somewhere.
Wow.
She talks fishing. She wants to watch fishing on TV. Her favourite bedtime story is the British Fish Identification book.
Amazing.
She's just always asking. She threw a paddy before I came out because I said I'm going to talk about fishing.
Yeah.
And she wanted to be here. She wants to talk about fishing.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully she can enjoy listening to it.
Yeah.
If she
so that's my future, just sharing it. And I just, if anybody out there, any juniors or anything, if I can help share some information that helps you catch fish, message me. I know what it's like at the start when your confidence is low and you see the guys at the top. I'll just message me and I'll do whatever I can to help put you on the fish, because I'm selfishly, I get as much of a kick these days out of seeing somebody else catch a fish as I do myself. I'll set myself these goals, but I want to see you guys catch. So
yeah, that's
message
good.
me.
Yeah, you'll get a flood, mate. You can flood.
No worse.
Yeah. And so, where do you see the future of the sport going? Obviously, I'm talking mostly about LRF really here.
So the future of the sport, we call it a sport.
Yeah,
we're on BT Sport, so I suppose it kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called a sport as a
we hardly sweat.
Yeah,
it's not a sweat. Sport.
I mean,
when you do it last year's fundraiser, we certainly sweated then.
We sweat a lot then. If you've ever seen Rich Salter and Joe Mole go up a cliff, mate, it's there's some sweating going on.
You could bass with me, I'll show you what a real cliff is. But no, the LRF scene has never been stronger. It's amazing. Like I said, I've been in it for quite a while, and looking back at it retrospectively, it's had its highs and it's had its crashing lows. At the start where there was a big uplift, and I say big uplift, that was 100 people in the country. We started getting featured in magazines, and tackle brands jumped on it. You mentioned it, like, I'm not going to name brands, but a lot of brands naming their tackle LRF to draw the market. rightly or wrongly, it just wasn't. It grew quick to 100, which actually on the grand scale of things isn't a lot. So kind of as a consequence of that, it drops right off. It dropped massively to the point where a lot of tackle shops that I was going into trying to find ISOM or whatever it was were saying, no, we don't stock that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there was a trend for hashtag Lerf is dead.
Yeah, I remember.
We used
Just back
it.
when I
We used it
started.
ironically.
Yeah.
But there were shops that said, no, nobody's LRFing.
Yeah.
We can't afford to get it in just for 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah.
To what predominantly is down to you guys.
Oh,
You
thanks.
have like bumped it. You and the few shops that have stuck around. You guys have got Osborne and Crag up here. We've got
Yeah.
Art of Fishing down in Cornwall.
Yeah.
There are others. They stuck through it to the end, all the way through. But you guys are that draw. We've never had podcasts, and we've had articles in magazines, but we've never had a dedicated magazine. We've never had, and this is all off your guys' own back, your own time. You have grown this, so
Oh, cheers, man.
I'm grateful. It's given me somebody to compete against.
Yeah.
It was me competing against myself for a long time. So
Yeah.
now I've got 800-900 people to compete against,
Yeah. It's been really good.
and they're coming at me fast. I'm kind of like Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas, man. He's an absolute
And
machine.
Ollie's phenomenal. He fishes half a dozen days a year,
Yeah, yeah.
trails you around, and just like pulls out the coolest stuff.
He's he's ridiculous. Yeah, he was just we've joked about calling him the elusive Lerfer on Instagram because he doesn't fish any other time except through the comps.
That's it.
And he fishes so well. But yeah, I just I really appreciate it, Will, and just really appreciate your time talking through this with me, mate.
No, it's been my pleasure. I can
Yeah.
talk fishing and LRF all day long. So
Yeah. Well, this has been a real pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. And this feels like an appropriate place to stop. So
perfect.
thanks for listening, guys.
Cheers.
The Big Lerf Podcast, talking LRF and more.